My name is Rob. I work with Enhanced Ventures. We're focused on helping large companies to commercialize research and development. Kicking off proceedings today, this afternoon, we have a panel called AI Futures, where public research meets private innovation. And we're gathered here at Raise. Last year, Raise was a much smaller event. I think there's maybe about 8 companies exhibiting. This year, it's a much larger thing. And developments in AI have mirrored that growth that we've seen in Raise also. Public research bodies are making breakthroughs. We have private innovation growing faster than ever before. We've got capital being deployed at record levels. And the challenge is that sometimes the handoff between public and private is less than perfect, and there can be some friction within that. And we've gathered today an amazing panel of speakers, both on the public side of things and on the private as well. We've purposefully created a panel with differing viewpoints. We're expecting some sparks to fly today, folks. And without further ado, I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. So, Isabel, would you like to start? Just your microphone's just there to your... Oh, yeah.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. So my name is Isabelle Riel, and I'm working at PSL University, so in center of Paris, and I am the head of the Prairie PSAI, so Paris School of AI, a research institution about AI.
So I'm Gaël Varoquaux. I'm a research director in machine learning and AI at INRIA. I'm also co-founder of a few startups, the latest one being Probable.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Joëlle Barral. I'm a director of research and engineering at Google DeepMind. I lead team doing foundational research. Most of them are across Europe. Some of them are in the United States. And I sponsor all of our work in healthcare.
Hello. My name is Antoine Bordes. I'm the chief scientist of Helsing, which is a European defense company founded 4 years ago on the basis of using AI and software to change the way we do defense in Europe. And before that, I was at Metafair for a long time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, folks. So we have Isabel and Gaël on the public side. We have Joël and Antoine on the private side, and we're really excited for a great discussion today. Folks, just to kick things off and I guess set the scene a little bit. So naturally, like, AI has been growing, development seems to be going faster and faster. And I think a lot of people think the future is potentially a lot faster than we think. Thinking ahead, to the next 10 years or so. So for example, 2035, if everyone could maybe outline, in maybe 30 seconds or a minute, like, what is one thing that an average European citizen or business will be able to do in 10 years' time? We might start with Antoine first.
Yeah, it's a difficult question. 10 years from now, I think we don't really know. I wish that we can still all have the freedom to use the AI we want. I think that's, which means that we have infrastructure to run it the way we want, and also to create business with it, and we also have access to a variety of models that allow to do that. And there's not like only one way where you can apply that.
Awesome. Joël?
Well, I do a lot of work in healthcare, and in healthcare, 10 years is actually a good time because it's roughly the time it takes to become a physician. So we like to think that people who are starting medical school now, 10 years is the world they'll live in once they start their practice. And we're also envisioning a world in which, right now, if you're lucky and you have a physician in your family, usually, they become the first person you call, no matter what's happening with you physically, and you have a question, right? Because they also help you navigate the healthcare ecosystem. They may not be, the cardiologist you need, but they will still reassure you, and they will tell you whether that's really urgent or not. So in healthcare, I think we truly believe that within 10 years, generative AI will become this assistant that all of us can rely on, not only the handful that have a physician in their family.
Gaël, what can we expect to see in? And actually, for this side of the audience, we'll say, what can we expect? What do you expect to see in 5 years' time?
5 years. I'm never really good at, doing projections in the future. What I can say is that the difficulties in terms of application and impact that I foresee are difficulties that are more related to adoption of technology and how it changes the tissue we're in. There's going to be all kind of things that are called rebound effects. An example I like to give is day-to-day bookkeeping and administration. You would think that computers would have decreased this, but they actually increased this. So I do think that a lot of the changes that we're going to see in society are going to be driven by equilibrium between technology and the way society uses technology.
Isabelle.
I think this is almost impossible to answer your question. You cannot imagine, if you speak about public research, it's really the creation of knowledge. So if you can imagine what you will have, it's not research, if you already know it. It's not engineering. And I hope that in 10 years we will have something that we could even not imagine today. Imagine you 10 years before, in 2015, would you have imagined to have ChatGPT as a citizen? For companies like the one of Antoine, we were at this time even in big plan for army and construction of boats and things like this. And today we have drones. This is how research is working. If you want to dream, you have to dream behind the frontier.
Dream behind the fountain.
The frontier.
The frontier. Antoine, do you want to come in there?
I said fountain is good. I like the dream behind the fountain.
Awesome. Just to come to Joël on that one, like you mentioned, healthcare, there's going to be big changes. And I think a really interesting point Isabelle made is that, we didn't... A lot of what we see now is not necessarily what we expected, and it was just what developed over time. What have you seen in the healthcare? What has surprised you over the last 5 or 10 years in terms of what has emerged versus what you would have expected to emerge?
Yeah, maybe two things to echo what Isabelle was saying. I vividly remember, so before heading our research teams, I was leading our surgical robotics endeavor. And when we started that project, it was around 2015. And I remember, brainstorming, and we had a cloud with the big question mark, because cloud was just becoming a thing, and it was not at all obvious that we would start connecting all of those devices so that we can gather all the data, so that when you start a new operation, you're actually benefiting from all of the operations of the same type that have been performed before. So that was 10 years ago. In terms of what has surprised me more recently, when we started looking at what large language models could mean for healthcare, I had done a lot of healthcare innovation, and so my advice to the team was to focus on a narrow problem, right? Pick one unmet clinical need, characterize it fully, know which patient population you're going to go after, etc. Luckily, the team didn't listen to me. They just really tried to push the technology. And relatively soon after that, we published MedPalm in Nature. So that was the first Palm, the first large language model fine-tuned on a medical corpus. And that has been, that has shown that it's capable, for example, of looking at an X-ray and deriving the radiologist report that would, that a radiologist would have written based on that image. It's not perfect yet. It's still research. That's why it gets published in high impact journals. Those things are not yet commercial products, but my instinct in terms of how long it would take to get to something that works none of the time, which is when it's squarely within research, to something that works 99% of the time, to the level we need for broad adoption, that time has really been a lot shorter than anything I could have envisioned.
Awesome. Super interesting. And Antoine, in your space, you work in a very high stakes space, and you're with Helsing, you're both on you're researching new things, and you're also delivering new products to the market. How do you map that process of innovation from idea to testing to ultimately delivery, and how do you go from that place of something where conceptually it works to a degree at some level and can be helpful, to something that you can really stand behind, and ultimately that governments can stand behind?
Yes, it's similar a bit to healthcare to some degree, but the way we approach that is so I think there are two recipes. I mean, two parts of the recipe. The first one is that when we start to do an investment, so we do early investment in technology that we feel are going to be impactful for defense, even before there is any procurement contract. So we start by self-funding. So we need to be careful about what we pick, because of course then this is our own money. But when we do that, it's basically the combination of having a hunch or a technological vision in terms this is going to change the direction, but also informed by discussion with stakeholders, government, military, etc., about what are the gaps, right? So this is really product building in some way. Really trying to build that 5 years, 3 years, 5 years out in the future. And you try to identify where the two collide, where there is something in technology we can do, it could make a difference, and when it could fill a need. And if you look, Isabel mentioned the drone space. There's a lot of, so drones are now, but the drone from last year, the drone from this year, the drone from next year are all very different. So now you should not be thinking in terms of purchasing drone. You should be purchasing drone programs that will update the drone every 3 to 6 months. So this idea about we're not thinking now that what's the drone we need to ship now, because those ones were conceived last year. Like what's the drone we need to ship next year, and what do they need to have? So that's the first part of the recipe. Try to connect these two lines. The second angle of the recipe is of course data, and data. Okay, so it's not surprising, but when you need to basically meet the standard that Army needs, which are pretty high, well, you need to be able to show that the technology, whatever that is, if it's AI, if there's software, hardware, shows, and the certain level of requirement of quality, right? There's a quality assurance process. For AI, it's going to be the same that it is for the other products. So there is a requirement, and you need to meet them. And when you have a model that's based on statistics, to meet them, you will need to have a lot of samples to show that it's actually within the boundaries. This sample will be made by collected data that you collect, like flying drones, if you're in the drones, but also simulated data. And that's where AI can also help itself, that you can also simulate, but then you need to have some guarantee of the simulator, and so it's a loop that can take for a while, but it's a bit the way. So really the idea in terms of having the data flywheel and the data pipeline to be able to train, but most importantly to test and quality assure the models is extremely important for us.
Awesome. Data, data, and data. And data. And data. And also data. Isabel, over to you. So we had a brief discussion before the panel around, if public research, the goal is to advance knowledge, and then private innovation is about ultimately creating value, which also involves in increasing the level of knowledge. Like, what is can you maybe just outline the role of public research in terms of societal progress as it relates to innovation?
I have probably some bias because I am in the public field. Public research is very important to have researchers that can have freedom to look and to explore, even if sometimes it takes time to obtain something that will be transferable and valuable. So in this way, public research is really at the beginning of the story, at the beginning of the pipeline, and you cannot have future innovation if you do not have production of knowledge today. So this is one of the points. And the second point that is very important is we often forgot that public research does not stand alone. Public research is often done in university, in a public institution, when you have students, doctoral students, PhD students, postdoc, and so on. And it's very important also for companies to have these people educated by researcher, knowing exactly what are the last technology, the last idea, but also how to produce them and also how to take them to transform them. So it's really a continuous, and especially in AI, because today you have a very, very short time between something that is on the blackboard in a lab and something that will get in your pocket. So you need to really have people in companies that know the both sides of the world and are able to do the link between.
Awesome. So being able to connect the research with the development of products. Awesome. Gaël, interesting. So I would love to. We had a chat before as well. So you're known as the contrarian of the panel. You know, we've heard different modes of, you know, over the last couple of answers there around, you know, different ways to innovate and different ways to, you know, run these, you know, product development cycles. Like what are we not considering, and what is you know, the world, Europe, France, what are they not considering as it relates to the how of, you know, advancing knowledge and increasing innovation?
Well, I can't point to a specific point, because if I knew, we would be addressing it, right? But then what I really think, and it's not in a position with anything that has been said, is that the devil is at the boundaries. So you have boundaries between fields, you have boundaries between economical actors, you have boundaries between research and innovation, and you get missed opportunities, you get, you know, loss of energy, loss of information there. And so a lot of progress, including fairly fundamental research and fairly applied innovation, can happen at those boundaries. So I would look for missed opportunities at boundaries.
Awesome. So it's about, oh yeah, come on in.
I have a great example, actually, to illustrate some of the things you're talking about, and I would echo what you just said, right? It's we really need an ecosystem in which both public and private come together to push innovation and push knowledge. If you take AlphaFold, right, that DeepMind had, I think, the privilege to build, which has solved the 3D, the prediction of the structure of proteins being really the building block of life, right? If I can do this with my hand right now, it's because proteins have done their jobs. The AlphaFold was able to do that because researchers had accumulated the structures of proteins that had been characterized experimentally for about 50 years, since, you know, we've known that proteins are a series of amino acids. People did that in many different labs, and it often took the duration of a PhD, right? A student would do that characterization throughout their PhD to characterize one protein, and after they had done that, they would put the result of their research in a database that, after 50 years, had enough proteins to be able to train a machine learning model. And then Google DeepMind came in and you know, put many smart people and quite a bit of compute at the task, so that eventually we were able to derive an algorithm that can predict that structure. And in 1 year, then, with enough compute, we were able to predict 200 million proteins, so all of proteins known to humanity. And then we open sourced that and made all of those structures available to the scientific community, giving back, if you wish, given we had, you know, really built, I mean, we were on the shoulders of everything that came before us. And today, more than 3 million scientists worldwide have leveraged AlphaFold. So again, in many public research labs, this is being leveraged to further push the research, help discover enzymes that can digest plastic, or help discover new treatment for rare diseases, etc. So I think that's a great example of a public-private partnership that is really to the benefit of everyone.
Awesome. That's so interesting about that, the cycle, you know, from public, you know, into private, and then, you know, creating something of real value and then putting it back into the public domain where, you know, can continue to be built upon. And I think a lot of the great innovations we see today are built upon, almost all of them are built upon, you know, previous innovation as well. Thinking about funding, so there's, like, it feels like every week we hear another massive announcement of, you know, a big government grant. You know, France is putting, you know, a colossal amount of money behind AI. You know, VC funds are raising funds, you know, record levels investments at record levels. You know, the size of a seed round seems to, you know, what's considered a large seed round seems to grow every year. I think coming to Isabel, what method of funding, kind of thinking on the public side, what method of funding do you think is going to move the needle the most in terms of advancing knowledge?
We speak often about this public funding for research and so on. We need fund, but we have some. Maybe not as much as you can have in announcement in, I don't know, China or even US and so on. But we have fund, and government had put a lot of money on the table this last year. And it's good. It's a good direction. It's nice. We still have in France and in some way in Europe lack of a few things. We have even with all of this money, we have not enough money for research because this is put on very highlight topics. So it's not for all the research. And there are some domains, even in biology or other ones, that are not as well funded as AI. And maybe the next steps of discovering will come from them. And secondly, we still have, this is one of our favorite topics of discussion, a lot of problems with administrative rules. Tomorrow, administrative rules in France and in Europe. You can give me twice or 10 times the money we have for my institution, I will not be able to spend it. Because there are so many rules and time to spend. AI is going very quickly. We have, as competitors, private people from private labs that can go very, very fast. We cannot always be the last one of the line saying that we want to follow the train or something like this. I don't know the name of the expression in English. So we need really to have some change in the administration that allow us to change the speed.
Change the speed. And Gaël, because we're talking about public research and private innovation, and I think to someone with a simple view like myself, what matters is just progress and acceleration. And to me, I care about what I can do at work and what I can do in my life. It doesn't really matter to me all that much where it came from. So why is it important for public research to live on, and what is it about public research that is so important in this accelerating world?
Well, it's no surprise that public research is associated with academia. Academia is about teaching, is about consolidating knowledge. If we don't do that, if we don't consolidate knowledge, we will drown under the accumulated, multiple dozens of New York's papers. And I think that's something we don't, in all sectors, including in research, we don't talk enough about this distillation of knowledge that is necessary to move on. So, if public research dies, I'm afraid we're not going to get enough of this distillation of knowledge, which will neither enable younger talents to grow, nor older talents to grab ideas that are from, fields of progress that are not exactly theirs.
Interesting.
Yeah, if I can add, I think there's also a point in terms of a balancing force as well. So I think academia is supposed to be built for the long run as well. You can see how long has the university been alive and running. And so in a time on AI where you have a lot of changes, a lot of announcements, a lot of short-lived and long-lived revolution, right? Every day is a revolution. It's interesting to have important event, to have the universities that are these people who are thinking a bit longer. They have the perennity of it, and they can also help. I think distillation, I really like that. But there's this idea about what's going to last and what do we need to invest that's going to last beyond the 3 revolution of next week. And I think that's, of course, when you're building your business, this is not really the kind of mode of thinking that you have, because you need to go for customer existing products. So that's a different problem you're solving. and the two are very, very complementary.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, I think we are all really talking a lot about large language models and Gemini and the revolution we're seeing, which is primarily with those models and agents. But there's a very, I profoundly believe that generative AI will transform many of the scientific fields, not just computer science, not just what we're seeing today. In the same way, with AlphaFold, we've seen a revolution in molecular biology. We're likely to see the same thing in chemistry, in physics, and even in the humanities. Right? You're not going to do history in the same way when you can really search through vast amounts of knowledge in a way that's completely unprecedented. And so academia plays a huge role in anticipating that and training a generation of students that will be both fluent in their history or chemistry or biology, but also understand AI and understand how AI can be mastered towards benefits for all of society. And so we also build models that are open weight like Gemma, and we had a great event last Saturday on how to leverage Gemma for healthcare. I think it's really important, and academia is well positioned to really infuse all of society, and that goes back to the very first question where what can prevent some of the things we envision to happen 10 years from now. Well, how much it's really permeating society will really matter if we want AI to benefit everyone.
Awesome. That's super interesting. And I think a theme that's emerged over the course of this discussion is this ideal world of a very circular system of public research and then private working with that, and then maybe that coming back into the public domain, and private companies then benefiting from that, building the next wave of innovation, and then ultimately like public institutions which engage in research but also engage in education, distilling that and sharing that with the populace to ensure that the next wave of researchers and entrepreneurs and innovators are equipped and ready to play their role in the process. Thinking about that circular, I think we've painted a picture of this like ideal world, this like future perfect of this perfectly circular thing. We've talked about some of the boundaries. Like, Antoine, what do you think are the biggest blockers right now that exist to like a symbiotic flow of public and private innovation?
Yeah, a bunch. I think so. We are in a worldwide competitive market right now, and so of course it's difficult to be competitive when not everybody's playing along the same rules. So I think whether it's public or private, I think we are lacking in Europe of maybe. I'm not saying we have too much regulation, because maybe we do, but it's once again we talk about the AI Act, but actually the regulation is impacting the academia as well, even though they're not impacted by that. So I think there's just like a way so that, for me, a lot of it is a matter of giving the impulse and the energy, and maybe that's in this room as well, to actually building it in academia or not. I was before going to private, I was in academia as well, and there are a lot of very talented people, and sometimes it's just like, this is too much, right? It's just like, okay, I've tried once, twice, 3 times, 5 times, 5 grand, 20 students, 30 students. At the end of the day, you're just tired of it. And so, because it's hard, the research is hard, but everything else around that, Isabel, is hard. And so, how do you keep the flame alive? And if you move to the private side, entrepreneur is the same. First company doesn't work out, you don't raise your money, they don't do, or they launch the stuff next door, etc. Or in the US is way easier, blah, blah. So, the two are hard. So I think the biggest blocker at the core of it is also giving tap in the back, and also helping ignite that. I think in France in the last few years we've been pretty good at igniting a generation, especially on the private. So I think this is hey, it's possible, and having an ecosystem. I think Joel is a very big fan of that. It's very important that, okay, I've done it before, I can show you how it works. And also try to go back and forth, right? So I think in Europe, we've been a bit shy that if you move from academia to the company, to private, you're dead to academia because you're a trader, so to speak. I think we're changing that. But Gaël has 2 companies. Isabelle is working with companies as well. So, but we need to do more of that, right? In the US, it's just like common nature. It's always Fei Li. How many times did she go back and forth, right? For instance, and that's great. But it's back and forth, right? So right now it's one-way door. I think how do we come back the door back? Because there's a lot to learn on both sides. I think this is really what I would really wish. But really thinking that we're also in a global market for talent. So also if people, private or public, what the loser could be that they're just gone somewhere else, and in private because or in public as well, because the best prof can be hired in other countries and because they have a good deal, and we've seen that as well. So this is working for both the channel, if you want.
Awesome, super interesting. And Joel, on that point, so you lead, you lead a team at DeepMind, and like thinking from a talent point of view, like what are the blockers that you see in terms of, like maybe even at a country level, like when it comes to talent? I think talent in 2 ways: one on the skill side of things, and then also on the that attitude and the that relentless forward motion and the resilience in terms of failures, whether those are large scale failures like not large, but a failure of a company, or like personal financial difficulties that might come out of a company failing, or if it's just a professional level, like say a research project didn't work. What do you see like the blockers to getting the right kind of talent and ensuring that you have that for your business?
Yeah, so our teams are really global, right? As Antoine just said, like people come to the places where they can truly innovate and have an impact on the world. And they've been trained in a variety of countries, right? I have teams in Switzerland, in Germany, in France. I have colleagues in Bangalore. We have teams, of course, in Canada, in the United States, in London, etc. And very often on some of the toughest foundational research problems, we assemble teams with experts from all of those places, and they really work together. But to answer your question on some of the blockers that I'm seeing, I think one of the biggest ones is the disconnect between the skills you need to be able to address some of the biggest challenges of our time and the picture teenagers have in their head of what will lead them to have that impact on the world. Because I think if a lot of young folks really understood that with math and physics and biology, they are going to be able to tackle healthcare, they are going to be able to solve those problems that they really care about, then they would be motivated to take the classes, work hard, do the studies that are often quite long, right, in terms of getting the knowledge and the expertise you need. But then they would really be empowered, right? They will have the tools to change the world, to do and to be part of that. And so I'm really hoping that as much as we push science today, we also translate that into training the next generation and inspiring the next generation to go into those careers, because I really think that's how the next 10, 20, 30 years in Europe are going to be shaped, right? And we really need to have people that have been trained with those skills to be able to do it.
Awesome, super interesting. Isabelle, on the funding component, we talked about funding a little bit earlier, and you mentioned, and this has actually come up in a lot of the discussions on this particular stage today, there's been a lot of talk about sovereign AI, for example, and the challenge where, on one hand, there's lots of money being set aside for different projects, but also it's very difficult to spend that money. Like, what is it about that like, what is the impact of that, first of all, and second, how might we solve something like that?
I think that a first way to see it, it's an optimistic way. I think we have done a lot of changes in the public research world, especially in France in the last 10 or 20 years. We have started to accept people to go back and forth from university to companies. Okay, it's just the beginning. It's not so easy. but the law exists. Now we have to train to do it. We have a lot of money for AI, for example. We have new type of positions. So I think we are working in the good direction, but there are still old-fashioned way of thinking, and we have to change mind of people and to really go to something that is more flexible, more reliable, and this is not fast enough, but we are really working in the good direction, and we need people like we have today on the stage that know exactly the world of their own company, but also our problems, because they were academic before, and we can really together find a way to solve problem and to help people to go in the right direction.
Awesome. Go in the right direction. And Gaël, we'll take one more give you one more question, and we might open the floor to a couple of questions from the audience. But I love your contrarian view on things. I'd love to know what have we not discussed today that you think is like what have we missed in this conversation?
The elephant in the room, the power games. They're everywhere. Why is it that in public sector we struggle? Because of course bureaucracy is a power structure. It's not there by chance. Why is it that sovereignty is both difficult and important? Because of the power games. Why is it that sometimes, at least in France, the medical doctors are afraid of the AI because they're afraid of losing control on the decisions. And I think it's actually, we need to talk about these things because they're going to be there anyhow. Society is shaped by power structures, implicit or explicit, and not discussing them, ignoring them is not efficient.
So we need to look at them and try to be efficient. Awesome. Well, folks, it's been an amazing conversation so far. I think we have a few minutes left. Would love to know if there's anyone in the audience who has a question. Yes, gentleman over there. Just stand up and speak up.
So you worked for Meta, and now you came back to Europe, to European company, Helsing. Do you believe there's still a chance that we can win in some areas of tech and AI in Europe? How do you see the situation right now?
Yeah, I'm not retired, so I didn't come back here to retirement exactly. So I still do. And I want to know that I left Meta, but I was already in Paris when I was at Meta because Meta has always had a big presence in France. So I spent some time in the US, but also spent some time in France because Meta is also participating in the ecosystem of Paris, which I think is great. Yes, there's a chance. We need to believe in it. Otherwise, clearly, if you don't play, you don't. There's no chance of winning. But there's also, I think, we should not look for false excuses as well. Sometimes, there's not enough funding and there's regulation. I mean, are we building the good product as well? It's a question I would like to hear a bit more, right? Because sometimes it's a bit easy to say, they don't want to fund my company because I'm in France. Well, no, Helsing raised 1.3 billion. Okay, so, and Mistral raised a bunch of money and some other did. So it's possible. It's hard. And it's not for everybody all the time, but it's possible. So I think when you go to California a little bit, you will hear a lot of this experienced founders that say, okay, the product, right? So here in France, it's more like technology sometimes. So I have a good model and people will discover how good it is. So no, I think the model doesn't make the product. I mean, she knows that very well. So I would really try to say, building a product is hard. It takes time. It takes to know the customer. And usually the difficulty we have here is that you need to look for a product that scales beyond France. Okay, if you look for a product that scales within France, it's going to be too small a market. And that's where Europe is halfway through, okay? Because, of course, it's hard to scale to Europe. It's much harder than to scale from California to US, for instance. So I think this is where, how do you find a product that could scale, European scale or worldwide, built from here? If you have this idea, I think you can find the people to build it with you, and you can find the fund to do it.
Awesome. Well, folks, that's unfortunately all we have time for this afternoon. Please join me in a huge round of applause for our amazing panelists today. Thank you, folks. Thank you, folks.